All right, hey guys. We are here today to talk about annotating and how to annotate a story. Basically, what we're going to do is we are going to go over the basic steps of annotating and we're going to kind of do one together. So, what you need in front of you right now is your lottery story. It's a short story. If you have not printed this off from the internet, or from Schoology, you really need to get it and print it off. Your submission this week, or I can't remember what day it is. I'd have to go back and look. But there is a submission this week for you to annotate the lottery. We're going to annotate the first part together, but the remainder of the story you're going to have to annotate yourself. So it does really need to be printed off. If you can't print it at home, I highly suggest that you go to the public library and print it there, and they should be able to get it done for you. If you have no way to do that, then please contact me and let me know. All right, that being said, let's get right down to it and to how to annotate. So there are certain things that you want to look for when you're annotating. Essentially, annotating means that you're taking notes. Now, when y'all were younger, you were taught to basically, when you read each paragraph, you would summarize the paragraph, right? But that's not the case. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to write summaries. That's not what we're going for. Even though I know in the past they wanted you to do that, we're trying to go to a more in-depth analysis, something that where we connect to the story. That's essentially where we're trying to go. We're trying to come up with our own connections, our own thoughts, our own feelings about the story. We're looking for certain things. Of course, one of the big things that we're looking for is themes. You see way down here. That's why when you come across a theme, you want to put a star around it, okay? And it doesn't have to be a theme. It could be something that you think is a theme. Maybe you end up being wrong, and after you go through it, it's not a theme. You just decide, oh, well, that's only in that one section. But to start with, if you think it's a theme and you think it has potential, oh, that was a terrible star. You think it has potential, you want to put a star around it, okay? And connect it in that way, or out next to it in the margins. And essentially that's where we're going to take notes. We are going to take most of our notes is in the margins. The majority of our notes will be highlighting or writing stuff to ourselves. But with all that stuff, we want to make sure that we look for certain and watch for certain things. Words that we don't know, we don't want to just ignore. We want to circle those words. We want to look them up. Now, we may not look them up right away, but we want to look them up. We want to look at titles and graphics and make inferences, make predictions, make connections. Once again, you have that idea of connections, that you're connecting to the text. Question marks are your friends. Question marks mean that you don't know. Now, this could be that you're confused, don't know, or this could be that you just straight up don't know. Maybe you're making a prediction and you think that that could be the case, but you're not real sure, so you should come back and revisit it. So you put a question mark out to it. Now, you obviously want to add notes. You don't want to just put random question marks all over the place. You want to let yourself know for when you come back to it why you put that question mark there. Maybe out next to your question mark, you put possibly unhappy because you think the character might actually be showing signs of being unhappy, but you're not sure, so you put a question mark to it. Maybe you put a question mark out next to it because you don't understand, and you just write out beside it, confused. Okay? But essentially, you want to let yourself know what that question mark is there for. Also, I want to point out, unlike the summaries that you were taught when you were younger, these notes are meant to be short, 2 or 3 words, maybe longer, but every once in a while I will actually write out complete questions in the margin, but For the most part, you want them to be short, sweet, to the point. You want them to be something that draws in your attention and keeps you there and lets you know when you look back after you've read why you did that or why you wrote that. Or let's say that you come across a consistent theme throughout the novel of tradition, right? I shouldn't have put that. That's cheating. Of, let's say, you're going to pick that up in a minute. Let's say of unhappiness. And you notice that as you go through, you've written happy in several places. Well, it also lets you know when you come back and you're writing your essays, because you are going to have to eventually get there, that, oh, wow, I just can flip through the book and find all the places that I wrote unhappy or unhappiness. And that could possibly be a quote I could use because it definitely connects to that theme, or I wouldn't have put a star next to it or written it out in the margins. So there's multiple reasons that you do write these notes, and they are actually helpful to you if you use them wisely. Other things, you want to put an exclamation point next to plot points, major things. I would also highly recommend, besides the exclamation point, writing in different colors for plot points. Colors can be a big benefit to you. If you highlight and write in different colors, they can help you identify things quickly. They can also help you identify your personal reactions to them, which is definitely what you need to add with plot points. Something major happens in the story. Were you shocked? Were you sad? Were you angry about it? Include that information. Write it off to the side. Now, as with the plot points being in different highlighting color, it is a very good idea to highlight characters in a different color. And I like to go so far as to underline their name. Now, I keep the underlining in the same color as all my notes, but I definitely want, or block off really, I definitely want their name to stand out, because when characters are very first introduced, a lot of things occur. A lot of times you encounter their feelings, you encounter their description. It's very possible that you'll encounter their reaction to stuff, or that information will be revealed about them. And this is all connected to characterization. This is what makes you like or dislike a character. Think about any of the fairy tales you've ever read. The princess is never described as an ugly old hag because the author wants you to like her. Whereas the old lady or the evil guy or the antagonist is described as an ugly old hag because he wants you to dislike her. So it is very important that you keep that information and that you keep up with it. You need to underline or highlight words that stand out to you. Now, this connects to diction. This is the idea of positive and negative aspects in the story. So, obviously, you'd want the highlighter that you're going to use for the majority of the story. I always go with yellow. Yellow is usually my main highlighting color. So, like if I highlighted the names in blue, I would do the rest of the highlighting in yellow, and I would underline or highlight words that stand out to me that seem positive or negative. And you'll see this as you go along. Repetition is also extremely important. Anytime the author repeats, especially a word or a phrase, it's very important. He wants you to remember it. He wants it to stand out. And it very often connects to theme. Okay? So it is important that you pay attention to repetition and the idea of whether or not he's looking at something positively or negatively. Last thing not on the sheet that I will say, a lot of things that I do when I make notes is I remind myself of emotions that are going on. For instance, if I think something's funny, I might just put a smiley face out to the side. If I think something's really sad, I might put a frowny face, maybe even like I'm crying. If I am just irritated with the whole situation, I might make a mad face. I know it's somewhat juvenile, but in the same respect, it's very quick. where I don't have to sit there and write out big long explanations to myself. I can just put a quick little emoji and be like, oh yeah, that part was sad. And it will draw my attention when I need my attention drawn to something. So now that we've kind of gone over what you want to look at when you're annotating or some basic ideas there, let's jump right into it. Okay, today, like I said, we're going to annotate the lottery. The first thing I want to do, of course, is pay attention to the title. The lottery, of course, predictions, things I think about. I would say it makes me think about money, for sure. I associate money with the lottery. I associate chance, fate, destiny, luck. Okay, all of these things I think could be themes in the story, every single one of them, because that's what the lottery makes me think of. There could be other stuff, maybe be careful what you wish for if the story goes bad. But that would be my overall initial thought. I really probably wouldn't go beyond that. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't ignore the title. Titles are important. They're chosen for a reason, especially when you start looking at poetry. But in all aspects of literature, titles do matter, so they should definitely not be ignored. I definitely want to use that opportunity to make predictions, make inferences, that kind of stuff. Now, remember, once again, I'm not making major notes. It's little stuff. And I put that question mark here because these are ideas I want to come back to. In the end, was I right? Was it about money? Was it about chance? Was it about destiny? Was it about luck? Did I end up being correct about that? All right, so what we're going to do is probably not something you guys like, but for the flow of the story, we're going to read through the entire first page. We are then, all the way to right here. We're going to stop right here because that's this part's basically with the next section. But we are then going to stop, reread, and we're going to highlight and annotate and all that kind of stuff. Of course, you are more than welcome to annotate on your first read. I always do, personally. But I know the kids talk often about it making the story disjointed or disconnected. So for our initial purposes, for the flow of the story, we're going to read just through this first page without annotating. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours. So it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for noon dinner. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer, and the feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. They tended to gather together quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher. I am going to go ahead and circle this just to make this stand out. I'm pretending like I don't know what this means just because I feel like it might be a word you might not know. And maybe I'm wrong. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Bobby and Harry Jones and Dickie Delacroix, the villagers pronounced his name, that's supposed to say his. PDF issue. A lot of times it comes out with typos. His name, Delacroix, eventually made a great pile of stones in one corner of the square and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking among themselves, looking over their shoulders at the boys, and the very small children rolled in the dust or clung to the hands of their older brothers or sisters. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together, away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon the women standing by their husbands began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hand and ran laughing back to the pile of stones. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and his oldest brother. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances, the teen club, the Halloween program, by Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic activities. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him because he had no children, and his wife was a scold. When he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, there was a murmur of conversation among the villagers, and he waved and called, "Little late today, folks." The postmaster Graves followed him, carrying a 3-legged stool, and the stool was put in the center of the square, and Mr. Summers set the black box down on it. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool, and when Mr. Summers said, "Some of you fellows want to give me a hand?" there was a hesitation before 2 men, Mr. Martin and his oldest son Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside it. Okay, so we're going to go through one more time and we're going to reread it. Now, I will definitely say, if I was doing this, with you, like if I was you and I was doing this, the first thing I would do was I would find this word boisterous and what it meant, and I would look this word boisterous up. Of course, I would discover that it meant rambunctious. Probably an easy synonym to go with it would be excited. I would write this out. I might write it out in a different color just so because it's not necessary to my situation. But I can tell you right now, for all of you who don't look up words, if you don't know what a word means, you are not fully understanding what's going on in the story. I will also highly recommend don't rely on long dictionary definitions. Try to find synonyms, something simple, something easy that you know and that you're familiar with, so that it is easier for you than these long, crazy definitions in the dictionary. And then, of course, make yourself a note. You will remember the first time you read through it, but when you come back to it, you may forget what it means, and it'll save yourself time if you go ahead and make a short little note about what it is. So I'm going to read back through and let you guys see how, if I was reading this, honestly, the first time I annotate when I read initially, but even if I didn't do it the first time, how I would read through it the second time and annotate it the second time. Either way, I can honestly say I very seldom read a text once. It's just like this. Remember how we were supposed to come back to this question mark? If I read through and I did all that stuff, I would want to come back to all my question marks, to every single one of them, and to identify whether or not I was right about them, whether or not I had good predictions about them. Maybe I had a question or I was confused because it was some form of foreshadowing. I didn't realize it at the time, and now I am caught up. Well, in that case, I might erase my question mark or write underneath my question mark foreshadowing because I get what's going on. Or maybe I'll just answer my question. But it's very good to revisit. All right, so let's start from the top. I am going to think out loud, so that means I'm going to stop a lot because I'm going to explain my choices to you guys, okay, so that you see why I'm doing what I'm doing. My main highlighter is going to be the yellow, okay? I typically go with the yellow highlighter. You can choose whatever color you want. I'm probably going to highlight characters in green because I typically pick one highlighting color to highlight characters in and go with that so that it's consistent and I know when I go back through the book I can find it easily. So just that being said. All right, so let's get started. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely and the grass was richly green. First off, right off the bat, of course I have setting here, which is important. A lot of people disregard setting, but I would definitely say this seems very lovely. You've got this warmth about it. It even uses the word warmth. It feels just, I don't know, perfect, sunny, rich in greenness and happiness and profuse in goodness. So right off the bat, I would definitely say there seems to be this lovely good aspect going on within this village. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, now I think this is a plot point. Like if you were getting one of those questions where they were going to ask you just basic stuff, this might be how many people were in the village. So I find this to be a plot point, and there were 300 people in the village. I would also say that this lets me know that this place is small. Remember, they tell you in the other places it takes 2 days. So here, you're looking at a lot smaller area than the surrounding areas. So I would definitely consider that as part of a plot point, and I would make that notation to that regard. Notice that with each, I would like to point this out, that with each highlight or each underline I make myself a note off to the side. Like I said before, you want to make sure that you don't just randomly highlight stuff. You want notes. You want things to remind you of what you were thinking at the time. It will be very beneficial to you in the future. So, for everything, from your essays to your reading quizzes to all of it. So, always make yourself a little note. The whole lottery took less than 2 hours, so it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for noon dinner. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer, and the feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. I find this statement odd. That's the only reason why I would highlight it, and I'm going to explain why. I would have a question here. So, why do they not like freedom? Are they afraid of freedom? Are they... And the reason why I say freedom is because essentially that's what liberty is it's freedom. And it says here that they're uneasy and they're unsure about it. Does this just connect to their age? What's going on here? So I have my question mark here. This is definitely something I would want to come back to. They tended to gather together quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher, of books and reprimands. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones. So I want you to think for a second. What is it that we need to do here? Let me give you just a second. Okay, I don't know if you answered correctly, but if you didn't, it's okay. Not the end of the world. What we want to do when we come across a name is I just turned my pen off. We want to highlight it, and we want to make sure that it kind of stands out. Now, in different stories, it depends. But this could be a major character. This could be somebody we're following all the way through. Now, it could be a minor character, but either way, it's a character nonetheless, and we want to keep up with him easily and quickly and make him stand out as much as we can so that we can easily identify where he might have been described or where he might have had a reaction. Generally, this is the first time I see him, so I can learn a lot about him usually right away. And the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Oh, one thing. No, I did not make a note out for highlighting names, only because for me, like in that aspect, it's self-explanatory. That part of it is self-explanatory. Because I highlight them in each book the same way, and I make them stand out in the same way, I know immediately when I'm scrolling through that, oh, that's a name, that's a character. Or, oh, that's a place, because I do it with places, too, actually. I should have mentioned that earlier. So I know right away, well, that's why I did that. It's not because of anything else. I don't have to explain that to myself because it's something I always do. Of course, that being said, no matter what you decide to do with your annotations, I would highly recommend coming up with a consistent way to annotate, something that works well for you, that you do the same way every time. If you always highlight the characters in green highlighter, then continue to do that in every book. If you always, write out definitions in red, then continue to do that in every book. Whatever works for you is great. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to follow mine, but try to come up with something consistent and that works well for you. The villagers pronounced his name Delacroix, eventually made a great pile of stones in the corner of the square and guarded it against the raid of other boys. So I'm not sure why they're all making stones. I don't know if you've caught that, but like all of them are piling up stones, and I'm not sure why. So, I mean, I write up that I'm confused over here a little bit. Not sure why. You might even write that. Not sure why. And that might be better, to be quite honest. I really am not confused. I'm not sure why. Why are they all doing this, you know? Because it talks about the stones, you know, later down here. And it just seems to be a thing. So I'm going to definitely pay attention. Remember, I told you anytime they repeat something or they bring something up like that over and over again, dang it. Sorry, guys. There is a thing with it. There's something going on there. Some reason why it's being repeated over and over again. The authors don't just do that for no reason. Okay, so great pile of stones, one corner of the square, and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking among themselves, looking over their shoulders at the boys, and the very small children rolled in the dust or clung to the hands of their older brothers or sisters. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting, rain, tractors, and taxes. I would say they're very focused on work, right? Because all this is work related. They're not talking about, oh, did you see last night's baseball game or anything like that. They're focused on work. They stood together away from the pile of stones. Now, here's another thing. The pile of stones, of course, is brought up again, but they seem to have like, I don't know, some kind of weird reaction to it. Like they don't want to get near it. I'm getting the feeling the pile of stones is bad. Because like they smiled rather than laughed. They had this, they're quiet. That was another aspect to it. It was in here somewhere. They were quiet and they smiled rather than laughed. The women wearing faded house dresses, I would make the assumption that this means one of two things. Either they're poor, okay, or possibly, well, I mean, that's probably would be my guess if I was going to be honest with you. I mean, of course I've read this, so I know the whole aspect to it, but if I was just guessing, I think that would be my only guess there, is that they were poor, and because you have this idea that they're faded, that they're old. Sweaters came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon, the women, standing by their husbands, began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin, okay, we got a name. Let me see. I was trying to see if we had another name. I knew we had another one pretty close, but I didn't know how close. Ducked under his mother's arm, grasping hand, and ran, laughing back to the pile of stones. So he didn't listen. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and the oldest brother. So I would definitely make 2 notes here. First off, I feel like, and I know you guys, you're going to know now, but I feel like you have a sense of like tradition going on here because he took his place there. Like that's where he was meant to be. And he knew it. He wasn't told to go there. He wasn't instructed, hey, go over here. He knew that he was supposed to go there. I would also say that you have a possible theme here besides, well, you have 2. One, you have tradition, right? Which we pointed out over here. You also have women's roles. Because the kid didn't listen to the mom, right? He ran off laughing when it was the mom. But with the dad, he was quick to turn around and do what he was supposed to do. So you've got two possible themes here. You've got the idea of tradition, and you've got the idea of women's roles versus men's roles. Of course, you'd have to see for something to be a true theme in a story, it has to continue throughout. So we would definitely want to see if it continued as we read. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances. Hold on, I know what's about to happen, so I'm just gonna, because we've read it. Teen Clubs, the Halloween program by Mr. Summers. So Mr. Summers is the guy who does everything, right? He's like the main guy, the main man. He does everything, apparently. He's in charge of everything. Who had time and energy. Oh, okay, I've got that right. To devote to civic activities. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and the people were sorry for him because he had no children and his wife was a scold. All right. So I want to highlight his description. Descriptions of characters are very important. They tell you a lot about characters. They tell you whether you're going to like them or not like them. For instance, if we look at this guy right off the bat, goodness gracious. Try this again. Oh, that scared me. I'm sorry. I thought I'd lost all that. If you look at this guy right off the bat, the fact that he's jovial, of course, if you don't know what jovial means, you would definitely want to look this word up, but means he's happy. He's a happy man. And he's got this round face look. You almost get like a feeling of him being like Santa, right? And even with the coal, he ran the coal business. I have a real Santa Claus feeling here. But you feel sorry for him on top of that. So either way, you're really kind of supposed to feel for this guy. I would definitely say that you're not supposed to dislike him because his wife is mean and he has no children, so it's so sad. Of course, that also kind of makes me question society. Do they only find value in family or kids? Could he not be fulfilled being this guy who does everything in the village? That seems like a strange thing that, I mean, I understand if he wanted kids, but there's not necessarily an implication about it. It seems more like he's just deviating from what their norms are. And when I think about that, it makes me come back to the idea of if he's deviating from their norms or moving from their norms, I would think that he's moving away from their tradition. So I have this idea. I'd definitely be careful. I wouldn't want to connect that to the skulls. They have this idea of, connecting him and being sorry for him because he can't go with the tradition. When he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, okay, now this is one of those moments where it's not a character, right? I gotta erase a little bit. I'm having so much problem right now. I don't know why. Okay, it's not a character. I highlighted that just a little bit. But I think it's going to be really important. I think this black wooden box is going to matter. So I am going to make it stand out. I also want to do it in a different color. Almost forgot. I am going to make it stand out and make it where I can quickly find the first time this black wooden box was mentioned, so that when I'm starting to answer questions about it, I know, because I feel like this is going to be something big. Anyway, when he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, there was a murmur of conversation among the villagers, and he waved and called, "Little late today, folks." The postmaster, Mr. Graves, followed him, carrying a three-legged stool, and the stool was put in the center of the square, and Mr. Summers set the black box down on it. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool. Okay, once again, I get this weird feeling of like, I can't decide whether they're excited about it or not. I would argue that there's a sense of dread here or fear. Because when you think about it, if you're waiting to find out if you won something lottery wise, like you won some money, usually you're all about it. Like you're leaned in, you're focused, you're paying attention. So the fact that they are keeping away from it, once again, it kind of connects to them keeping away from this pile of stones up above. The fact that they're keeping away from it brings back this idea of fear or bad. And I would actually go back up. Now, obviously, if you can't erase, that's fine. But where I wrote this pile of stones is bad, I would come back up here and I would make a remark about fear. Because fear is a subject that could ultimately turn into a theme. So it's something that if I'm writing it over and over again and I look back through and I see that I've written the idea of fear several times, and I think, okay, well, fear could be a real theme in this story. It could be a real message that the author's trying to talk to me about. So if I start noticing patterns like that, I definitely want to make a remark about them. If you can't erase because you're writing in pen, that's fine. Just write underneath your question mark. Anyway. And when Mr. Summers said, "Some of you fellows want to give me a hand," there was a hesitation. Oh, see, once again, you have this fear coming out. You know, they seem nervous, unsure. They don't want to get too close to it or get too near to it. There was a hesitation before two men, Mr. Martin and his oldest son, Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside it. All right, so I am going to leave you guys to it. Basically, I want you to continue to annotate the story. For our purposes today, I want you to annotate in the same way that we have annotated. Sorry, it does that sometimes. If you go out and come back in, if you go in the right thing, there we go. It brings it back. Anyway, I want you to annotate in the same way we have annotated in the story, so that you can, I can just see that you understand the process and all that kind of stuff. In the future, if you kind of want to change it to fit your own needs, that's okay. But definitely, I want you to continue to annotate the rest of the story. When you are done, I want you to take pictures of the pages that you annotized, and you are going to include them, attach them to your submission, which will also include your answer to the short story, or to this story, your short answer to this. So I will give you time to do that. If you guys have any questions or misunderstandings, just send me a message through Schoology or email me, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. All right, I'll see you guys later.